Right now, as you're watching this, missiles are flying between Iran and Israel. The United States has joined the fight. Explosions are hitting Tehran, Tel Aviv, and U.S. military bases across the Middle East. This is the biggest military confrontation in the region since the Iraq War. But here's the thing most people don't understand. Iran and Israel used to be allies, close allies. For 30 years, they worked together, traded together, and shared intelligence. Israeli engineers helped build Iran's infrastructure. Iranian oil flowed to Israeli refineries. So what happened? How did two countries go from friends to sworn enemies who now threaten to wipe each other off the map? Let me explain. To understand this conflict, we need to go back to 1948. Israel has just declared independence. It's surrounded by Arab countries that want to destroy it. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq. They all see Israel as a colonial implant in the Middle East that needs to be removed. Israel needed friends, and it found one in a very unexpected place, Iran. At this time, Iran was ruled by the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The Shah was a secular, Western-oriented monarch who had no love for Arab nationalism. He saw Israel as a useful counterweight to his Arab rivals, especially Egypt and Iraq, so Israel and Iran became partners. It was called the _0_, Israel's strategy of allying with non-Arab countries on the edges of the Middle East to balance against the hostile Arab states in the center. The relationship was deep. Israeli military advisors trained the Shah's secret police, the notorious Savak. Israeli companies built Iranian infrastructure. Trade flourished. There were direct flights between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Thousands of Israelis lived and worked in Iran. This went on for 3 decades, 30 years of cooperation, partnership, and mutual benefit. And then, in 1979, everything changed. The Islamic Revolution. In February 1979, the Shah was overthrown. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, an elderly cleric who had spent years in exile, returned to Iran and established an Islamic Republic. The secular, Western-friendly monarchy was replaced by a theocratic regime built on a very specific ideology. And that ideology had Israel in its crosshairs. See, Khomeini believed that Israel was an illegitimate state, a creation of Western imperialism planted in Muslim lands. He called Israel a, quote, one that needed to be removed. The new Iranian government cut all ties with Israel immediately. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was handed over to the Palestinian Liberation Organization. But why? Why would Iran care so much about Israel? They don't share a border. They're not competing for the same territory. They're not even the same ethnicity. Iranians are Persian, not Arab. The answer is ideology. Khomeini wanted to export his Islamic Revolution throughout the Muslim world. He wanted to unite all Muslims under the banner of resistance against Western imperialism. And nothing united Muslims like the Palestinian cause. By positioning Iran as the champion of Palestinian liberation, Khomeini could appeal to Muslims everywhere, Sunni and Shia alike. Israel became the perfect enemy, a symbol of everything the Islamic Revolution stood against. Western colonialism, American hegemony, the oppression of Muslims, death to Israel became one of the founding slogans of the Islamic Republic, not because Iranians had any historical grievance with Jews or Israelis, but because opposition to Israel was the ideological cornerstone of Khomeini's revolutionary project. For the first decade after the revolution, Iran was too busy to actually do much about Israel. From 1980 to 1988, Iran fought a devastating war with Iraq. 1 million people died. The economy was shattered. Iran had no capacity to threaten anyone beyond its immediate borders. But Iran learned something important from that war. It couldn't defeat its enemies through conventional military power. Iraq had more tanks, more planes, more everything. And the entire world, including the United States, supported Iraq against Iran. So Iran developed a different strategy. Instead of building a massive conventional army, it would build a network of proxy forces, militias, terrorist groups, political movements, all funded, trained, and armed by Iran, but operating in other countries. This way, Iran could strike its enemies without direct confrontation. It could maintain deniability. It could fight without officially being at war. The first and most important of these proxies was Hezbollah. In 1982, Israel invaded Lebanon to drive out the PLO. The invasion worked, the PLO left, but it created a power vacuum in southern Lebanon, which was home to a large Shia Muslim population. Iran saw an opportunity. It sent Revolutionary Guards to Lebanon and began organizing, funding, and arming local Shia militias. These groups eventually merged into Hezbollah, the Party of God. Hezbollah was Iran's masterpiece. It was simultaneously a political party, a social service provider, and a guerrilla army. It built schools and hospitals. It won elections. And it launched attacks against Israeli forces in Lebanon that eventually forced Israel to withdraw in 2000. For Iran, Hezbollah was the proof of concept. A relatively small investment could create a powerful force capable of hurting Israel without Iran having to fire a single shot directly. And so, Iran built more proxies. Hamas in Gaza, Islamic Jihad in Palestine, various Shia militias in Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen. Together, these groups formed what Iran calls the _4_, a network of armed movements surrounding Israel, all supported by Tehran. Israel, meanwhile, was not sitting idle. From the Israeli perspective, Iran was building a noose around their neck. Hezbollah had 150,000 rockets pointed at Israeli cities. Hamas was launching attacks from Gaza. Iranian-backed militias were establishing themselves in Syria, right on Israel's border. And behind all of it was Iran, a country whose leaders regularly called for Israel's destruction. Israel responded with what it does best: covert operations. Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, conducted one of the most sophisticated assassination campaigns in modern history. Iranian nuclear scientists were killed in Tehran, shot on the street, blown up in their cars. Computer viruses like Stuxnet destroyed Iranian centrifuges. Mysterious explosions hit Iranian military facilities. Israel also struck directly at Iran's proxies. It bombed weapon shipments heading to Hezbollah. It assassinated Hamas leaders. It conducted hundreds of airstrikes against Iranian positions in Syria. But these were pinpricks. Israel could slow Iran down, but it couldn't stop the fundamental reality. Iran was getting stronger, its proxies were getting more capable, and the noose was tightening. Then came the nuclear issue. Iran's nuclear program started under the Shah, ironically with American help. The United States actually provided Iran with its first research reactor in the 1960s. After the revolution, the program continued, though slowly and secretly. The world found out in 2002 when an Iranian opposition group revealed hidden nuclear facilities. International inspectors moved in and discovered that Iran had been enriching uranium and conducting experiments that looked suspiciously like weapons development. Israel went into panic mode. For Israel, an Iranian nuclear bomb would be an existential threat. A country that calls for your destruction, that funds terrorist groups trying to kill your citizens, that has missiles capable of reaching your cities. If that country gets nuclear weapons, everything changes. Israeli leaders made it clear over and over again. They would not allow Iran to get the bomb. All options were on the table, including military strikes. For years, the world tried diplomacy. Sanctions were imposed. Negotiations happened. In 2015, the major world powers signed a deal with Iran, the JCPOA, that was supposed to freeze Iran's nuclear program in exchange for lifting sanctions. It worked for a while. Iran stopped enriching uranium to high levels. International inspectors verified compliance. It looked like the crisis might be over. Then, in 2018, President Trump pulled the United States out of the deal. Trump's decision to leave the JCPOA was exactly what Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu had been lobbying for. Netanyahu never trusted the deal. He argued that it merely delayed Iran's nuclear ambitions rather than eliminating them. But the consequences were severe. With the deal dead, Iran had no incentive to limit its nuclear program anymore. It began enriching uranium again to higher and higher levels, 20%, 60%, close to the 90% needed for a weapon. By 2025, international inspectors estimated that Iran had stockpiled enough enriched uranium for multiple nuclear warheads. The breakout time, how long it would take Iran to build an actual bomb if it decided to, had shrunk from over a year to maybe a few weeks. Israel's window was closing. Then came October 7, 2023. Hamas launched the deadliest attack on Israel in the country's history. Over 1,200 people killed, 250 taken hostage. The images from that day shocked the world. Israel responded with a massive military operation in Gaza, but Israeli leaders saw something bigger. This was the moment to dismantle Iran's entire network of proxies. First, they crushed Hamas in Gaza. Then, they turned to Hezbollah. In September 2024, Israel assassinated Hassan Nasrallah, Hezbollah's leader for over 30 years. Israeli strikes decimated Hezbollah's leadership and destroyed thousands of its missiles. Meanwhile, in Syria, the Assad regime collapsed. For years, Assad had been Iran's closest Arab ally, allowing Iranian weapons to flow through Syria to Hezbollah. Now that corridor was gone. Iran's Quote 6 was falling apart. In April 2024, for the first time ever, Iran and Israel directly attacked each other's territory. Iran launched hundreds of drones and missiles at Israel. Most were intercepted. Israel struck back at Iranian air defenses. In June 2025, Israel launched a full-scale air campaign against Iran. For 12 days, Israeli jets bombed nuclear facilities, military bases, and government buildings. The U.S. joined in, striking Iran's most fortified nuclear sites. A ceasefire was eventually reached, but the damage was done. And now, in February 2026, the fighting has resumed. U.S. and Israeli forces are again striking Iran. The supreme leader may be dead. Missiles are falling on Tel Aviv, on U.S. bases in Qatar and Bahrain, across the entire region. So, where does this end? The honest answer is, nobody knows. Iran's leaders believe they are defending Islam and resisting Western imperialism. They have built their entire government around opposition to Israel. Backing down would mean abandoning everything they claim to stand for. Israel's leaders believe they are fighting for survival. They have watched Iran arm terrorists on their borders, develop missiles that can reach their cities, and pursue nuclear weapons while promising to wipe Israel off the map. From their perspective, this is self-defense. The United States has chosen sides. American troops, American planes, American missiles are now directly attacking Iran. Whatever happens next, America is part of this war. The Gulf Arab states, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, are caught in the middle. Iranian missiles are falling on their territory. They've spent decades building their economies and their cities. Now they're being dragged into a war they didn't want. And ordinary people, in Iran, in Israel, across the region, are hiding in shelters, watching missiles fly overhead, wondering if this is the start of something even worse. Here's what I want you to understand. This conflict isn't about ancient hatreds. Iranians and Jews have no thousand-year history of warfare. For most of history, they barely interacted. When they did, it was often peaceful. Iran was home to one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world. This conflict was created in 1979 by a revolution that needed enemies. Israel became that enemy not because of what it did, but because of what it symbolized. And once the Islamic Republic made death to Israel its foundational principle, there was no easy way back. 47 years later, we're watching the consequences. Iran funded proxies. Israel bombed them. Iran pursued nuclear weapons. Israel sabotaged them. Iran threatened destruction. Israel struck first. And now we're here, with American bombers over Tehran and Iranian missiles falling on Tel Aviv. Nobody wanted this war, but nobody knew how to stop it. And one more thing. Whatever you think about this conflict, remember that most people on all sides just want to live their lives. Iranian families hiding from bombs didn't choose to be enemies of Israel. Israeli families running to shelters didn't ask for rockets from Hezbollah. The people dying in Gaza didn't start this war. Wars are started by leaders. They're fought by soldiers. But they're suffered by everyone. Right now, there are children in Tehran who can't go to school because their city is being bombed. There are children in Tel Aviv who have spent more of their lives in bomb shelters than on playgrounds. There are children in Gaza who have lost everything. None of them chose this. None of them can end it. The leaders made these choices. The history brought us here. And now, the world watches to see what happens next. I'll keep following this story. When we know more about what's happening, I'll make another video. For now, this is the context. 47 years of hostility, decades of proxy wars, and a nuclear program that one side sees as defense and the other sees as an existential threat. That's why missiles are flying tonight. That's why we might be on the edge of a much bigger war. And that's why understanding history matters, because without it, none of this makes any sense.